All right, YouTube. I almost wanted to make an occult video on the topic of like the interplay between primitivism and technocracy. I have these random, like, weird philosophical thoughts from time to time. I don't even need to use drugs to have those thoughts anymore, so it's all good. But instead, I think I'll frame this in a political and social way. I think it'll be easier to understand. Quite frankly, most of the people on my channel are here for political and current event discourse. Only a minority are here for the occult stuff. That total is growing, but, I'm not going to dedicate all my time to fucking occultism either. And this is the title of the video. Modernity is the result of the atomic arms race. That is, I don't think some people quite understand that the sort of like suburban picket fence and quarter-acre lot lifestyle with the immaculate lawn and the pink flamingos out front. I don't think a lot of people realize this, but the way that they're living is a direct result of atomic weapons. Specifically, if you observe what happened late in World War II with the firestorms that were engulfing places like Dresden as the result of bombing runs. Literally, 100,000 people keeled over in Dresden and tens of thousands in Munich when part of that was firebombed as well. It was quite effective. I think what was understood fairly early on in the atomic arms race is that an atomic weapon fairly far away from the epicenter at which everything's just a crater, you can end up getting out of control fires, especially you've knocked out all the electricity in the area, so your fire responsibilities are presumably quite a bit weakened. Water mains have broken, you're not necessarily going to have access to that either. And what ends up happening is things get engulfed by raging infernos. The modern suburban design, if you watch, you can actually find old propaganda videos regarding homes from the late 40s, early 50s period, and they talk specifically, it's explicit, this is just before the suburban boom, when people began making a mass exodus from the cities into these lower concentration zones of residential housing. Literally, a few years before, they're making videos talking about if debris is building up, it's a fire hazard, paint your house white, this will reflect some of the heat and light, and as a result, it's less likely to be engulfed. The interior of the home should be kept clear and what we would consider sort of nifty-50 spotless decor and stuff like that. Literally all of the decorating styles of postmodernism or even stuff leading up to the modern period, literally everything inside and outside of the home, as far as middle-class existence so-called goes, is the direct result of the atomic era. That is, the idea was have a much larger area of much lower concentration living, and a lot of people will end up being spared. By the way, Russia reacted by oversizing its missiles. We still continued to build 1, 2, 3 megaton warheads. They were talking about the Satan missile. You've got 8 3-megaton warheads, or you've got the Tsar Bomba, something that's just massively, massively overbuilt to the point at which you can destroy a whole county, essentially. This is what they began to build. Their targeting systems weren't effective enough, and they realized the Americans, instead of living in high-rises and apartments within inner-city areas that were more compact, they had begun to filter out into the suburbs, cleared out around cities. Now, some of the really, like Boston, something like that, there's not a whole lot of that kind of suburban development because, let's face it, the city was already had hundreds of thousands of people in it at the beginning of the atomic era. There's like one-lane roads and stuff. It kind of dates to the 17 and 1800s as far as city design. You look at the newer cities, the way in which highways were arranged. What was the highway system actually for? It wasn't built for ease of travel. Actually, it was a net negative on cities because people would begin bypassing. If they were going, for instance, if you're going from Austin to McAllen or something, you're bypassing all of those smaller settlements between them. And so it actually fucked around with a lot of small town economies. It was a huge net negative. They had to have known about this. The idea was it was quicker to evacuate an area that was going to get hit or had already been hit, so the survivorship would be higher. Another reason is literally they serve as runways. Air Force craft can land there safely on some of these larger highways, the interstate system that was built. It was all about atomic evacuation. It had absolutely nothing to do with convenience of travel. The idea of getting people to use cars by making it impossible for them not to use cars. The idea of centralizing commerce and higher end industry in one area and residential homes elsewhere is also a direct result of that. The central area gets nuked. The people largely have survived. And even like something like iodized salt, when that took off, oh, we're going to eliminate thyroid problems. No, it was it was a result of people wanting to have lots of iodine in their system so that all the atomic testing that they were doing wouldn't fuck around and cause thyroid cancer and goiters and all sorts of other problems by really screwing around with people's systems. It's a direct result of that. Even like modern processed food, you would think of all the preservatives that are put in, all of the binders that are put into meat and so forth. Why do you think that was done? Food stocks will last for months or years. A lot of the food prior to the atomic era, we're talking pre-World War II era, prior to fully mechanized warfare, it was fresh foodstuffs. Fresh fruits and veggies, freshly baked bread here at the neighborhood baker each morning, and it would last, maybe a few days or a week or two. But now all of a sudden you have these attractively labeled boxes of food, much of which requires little to no preparation, because if you have an atomic war, these packaged products, number one, modern canning and packaging, like vacuum sealed stuff, it's going to resist radioactive contamination, number one. It doesn't require heating, or if it does, doesn't require any specific knowledge to actually cook it up. It's almost like an MRE. Like I get these, at Big Lots, they have these packets of food. I know some of you may not like them because they're like a big box store corporation, whatever. They have these Indian foods, they're in these plastic and foil packets. And it's basically like an MRE when you think about it. You don't even have to heat it. You can eat it the way it is. It's perfectly safe to eat it that way. I heat them up because it's tastier. I want hot food. But if you were in a post-atomic situation, a lot of those foods would be good for a very, very long time. They wouldn't really be contaminated. If you have a society in which most of the food is like local and fresh all the time, and an atomic war happens, it's all contaminated. It rots after a couple of weeks, yes, even with a nice megadose of radiation to kill some of the bacteria on its surface. And then you're fucked. You don't have time to rebuild. You're starving while trying to rebuild things so that you can start making your own food locally again. Because that's what would have to happen. All the industry would be gone, or the chain of command would break down. The concept of, so you have interstate highways, suburban design, you have the prevalence of processed food, iodized salt, the fact that people are in cars. Specifically, it makes it easier for them to evacuate in such a scenario. It's not like with older city design, like pre-atomic era, you wouldn't need a car really. Most people wouldn't even bother having a car. They'd probably live within a few blocks of where they worked. Presumably, things would work themselves out that way. It would just be more efficient. Human beings, in such a scenario, they're going to tend towards efficiency. Once the suburbs were built, though, and some of these other like outlying areas, the rich, they position themselves even further out. They have their little manors. It's like even here in Rutland, around the city core, which, it's small town America. You have a downtown. Then you have sort of city housing, which is a mix of multifamily homes, small apartments, and higher end single family homes. Then you have what you would consider kind of suburbia. We don't have suburbs per se in like the sense of California or Texas or New York State or something here in Vermont as much. It would cost too much. It'd probably be $250,000 homes at that point. Nobody would fucking live in them. They want to live in a cabin or something. And then outside of that, you have the golf courses and the country clubs, and the richer people, they live further away than even the suburbanites do. So the idea was people are basically purchasing protection against atomic war. They figured if the downtown gets hit, the suburbanites, they get irradiated a little bit, but a lot of them will ultimately survive. They're packed with iodine, so as long as they stay in their basement for a couple weeks with the nice processed food that we've provided for them to get them used to all of these artificial products that will last for 6 months, a year, 5 years, sometimes more, as long as they're there and they take minor precautions, they'll be just fine. And the rich people that are even further out, unless the wind's blowing right in their direction, they're fine. They're okay. They won't even see their land damage. Even like modern suburban design outdoors, like the manicured, you would think of the typical boring manicured lawn. It's kept really short. They put fertilizer and like sprinklers on it to keep it really green and lush and low fire hazard, by the way. They put that on it, and then they mow it like every other day, and it's just a nonstop chore to maintain it at that manicured level. But why was that done? It's because there's no firestorm hazard. The concentration of flammable material is too low. There's a nice large space between houses. Even the idea of the white picket fence itself, why is it white? Why isn't it black? Why isn't it brown? Is it because white's simply more attractive? Is it because of deeply held racism? No, it's none of these things. It's literally to keep it from burning, because it will reflect more of the light and the heat of the atomic explosion that just destroyed all the lower classes living downtown. It's literally basically every fixture of life right now is the result of this. Even like the internet, the ability to communicate in that manner is atomic era. It's not pre-atomic, it's atomic era. What application can you think of for something like modern computer systems in the form of an atomic war? Well, not only controlling missiles and stuff like that, and all of your military assets, the drones and all the other computers they put in everything now, but also storing information for when your technology gets back to that point, you don't lose all of the culture you ever had. Yeah, we've got books, but a book doesn't contain music. Vinyl's gonna melt. CDs will get all scratched up. Put it on a nice flash drive, it'll last a lot longer. Put it on an SD drive or something that can be stored in a very small place. It can be hidden very easily. It can be a repository of knowledge, even if it might get fried if it's outside of a Faraday cage if the atomic war happens too close to home. All of these things are the result directly of the atomic era. Even like modern politics. Modern politics is post-atomic politics. It's essentially the fact that things have fundamentally changed because of the grand chessboard. That is, governments which will end up causing the atomic war, let's face it. Here's the tragic paradox, is that the same governments taking people's liberty to try to stave off atomic war will end up causing the atomic war in time themselves. It won't be some little Joe Schmo who got profiled by the police. It'll be somebody pressing a button in a bunker somewhere. But even the way in which they operate, the move towards globalism is an attempt, a failing attempt, but an attempt to try and stall an atomic war. It won't work. It's well-meaning utopian nonsense, but that is why it's being attempted. Globalism is the attempt to do that. Nationalism, the resurgence of nationalism that you see, is an attempt to forestall it as well in many ways, because it's seen that globalism is perhaps even more dangerous. So literally, when you look around yourself, look at the different things that you have around you, your home, the land you live on, maybe if you have land, or your apartment or whatever. Look at the belongings you have and think good, long, and hard about what its applications might be in a shit-hits-the-fan atomic scenario, because chances are, in some way or form, a lot of the things around you were deliberately designed in that manner, specifically because of the likelihood of an atomic strike upon your city. That's about all. Peace out.